So I drive this road every single day, and as I drove past it, and I'm not watching my camera, so I'm not seeing what you're seeing, but as I drive past this one feature in a field, the archaeologist in me always says, there's something not right about that lump out in that field. So we're coming up on it here shortly. So I actually was able to talk to the landowner a little bit today, and as we're coming into a little dip here, and you're going to see it here in just a moment. You're going to see this just hill, this mound, and right there it is. See that mound right there? Right there. It doesn't look like very much. Looks like a bump. Now, what you can't see from your perspective, that's a big mound with nothing around it, just a flat plain, and you can see woods all around it, but the archaeologist in me said there's something not right about that, and I wonder if that's an Indian mound. Now, Indian mounds come in many shapes and sizes and forms around here. They're all over the place. We're in northwestern Pennsylvania, northwestern PA. By the way, we're coming up on another mound, but that's a sand mound for a septic tank. That's not what that mound in that field is. But here in northwestern PA and in eastern Ohio, in the northern panhandle of West Virginia, we had the mound builder culture, which went all the way through Appalachia down into the south, down into Arkansas, Louisiana, and all those places, Mississippi. Native Americans, or American Indians, if you will. And so I looked at that mound and I thought, boy, that just doesn't seem right. So I stopped in and I talked to the landowner. I had never seen him around. I was always looking for a vehicle, and so I said, I saw his truck there, so I stopped by and I said, hey, I said, do you own that field back there? And he said, yeah. Why? I said, well, what do you know about that mound out there? And he's like, I know it's a pain in my neck. He said, gets in the way of farming. He said it ruins the machinery because it's full of rocks. And now, farmers did pile rocks in their fields. But one thing that farmers didn't do was farmers did not put a layer of soil on top of their rock piles. They just left them there. And so I said to him, well, I said, that's not a sand mound for a septic tank. No. He said, that's dirt. He said, but there's rocks in it. There's tons of rocks in it. And he said, it's dry. He said, it's the only dry spot in that field. And he said, all I can do is grow hay there. He said, I tried growing crops, but it messed up my equipment because I'd have to go really slow, and every time I went over that hill, he said it'd be hard on the plow or the discs or whatever. So he said, I just put hay in there. And he said, why are you so interested in that mound in that field? I said, well, I don't want to get your hopes up or anything. I said, but I think, in my gut, I said, in a former life, I was an archaeologist, and I said, I've dug in Europe and places like that, and I've seen mounds in a lot of places, and I said, I don't want to get your hopes up, but I said, I think that might be an Indian mound. And he just sort of chuckled, and he said, you know what? He said, I remember a long time ago an old timer told me that was an Indian mound. And he said, that mound has been there as long as I can remember. And he said, I'm 60. And he said, my dad bought this farm and it was 1950. And he bought the farm, and he said, that mound was always there. And he said, there were never any trees there. It was always cleared land. He said, and the only trees that were around it were on the other side of it. There was a fence row of young trees that his dad ripped out because his dad wanted to plant a field there. And he said, when we started digging all that up, we found that hill was full of rocks. And he said, I'd like to just get rid of it so that I could actually put some crops there instead of just hay. So I said, well, before you do that, before you go and bulldoze that, I said, let me take a look through there. I said, whenever it's drier, obviously. And he said, oh yeah, it won't dry out till probably April. So he said that one mound, he said it's full of groundhogs because they like it because it's dry. It's the only dry spot in that field. So I told him that I'd be back in the spring after it dries out, maybe March, April, May, something like that, and take some measurements. What you couldn't see from your vantage point is that mound is probably at least 6 feet tall, and I'd say, I mean, it's at least probably 40 feet around, and it's just a mound out in the middle of a flat field. And I can tell you, the Indians used to create mounds, and I mean, you might think of Indian burial mounds. They're not all burials. Some of them were ceremonial. Some of them they built little buildings on top of, and they actually lived on top of mounds. But I don't know. I don't know what that mound is. But here this spring, I think we're going to take a look and see if we can find anything on the surface. I asked him if, when he plowed the field, if they ever found any arrowheads or anything. He said, no. He said, but now that you mention it, he said, out in New Hamburg is a village around there. He said, out in New Hamburg, there's this field where they plow it up, and there are just certain spots that are dark, almost black dirt, really rich. And they find Indian artifacts there all the time, arrowheads and projectile points and things like that. And I know where New Hamburg is, and it's only maybe 3 miles, maybe 3.5 miles from where that mound is. So it is not impossible to believe that could have been a ceremonial site for the Native American population around this area. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize is the Great Indian Warpath, which was not just used for war, but it was also used for trade and travel, went straight through these parts. As a matter of fact, Route 19, or depending on where you're from, Route 19, actually follows the Great Indian Warpath, and Interstate 79 follows the course of Route 19, roughly. And so if you travel on Interstate 79, you are basically traveling just a few miles away from the Great Indian Warpath, which was the highway for the Native Americans. All the Seneca and all those people, they traveled that all the time. They traveled either for war or for trade or just to move, for hunting, things like that. Whenever they traveled, that's where they traveled. So we are not that far away. We're only that mound. It is probably sits maybe 2 or 3 miles off of Route 19. So who knows? But stay tuned, I guess, for part 2 of this. But it's going to be a long wait because it's just January, and I don't plan on going out there until maybe April or May. So, but I thought that was a pretty neat find, and I thought that it was really interesting that apparently the old timers said that there was an Indian mound there as well. So, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a great day, and God bless.